AITA for refusing to pay child support when my ex hid the truth and my family betrayed me. A few years ago, I was in a relationship that, in retrospect, was one of the worst decisions of my life. Back then, I was young, naive, and believed in the best in people, even when they gave me clear signs to the contrary. I dated a woman who, from the very beginning, displayed possessive and manipulative behaviors. At the time, I didn't see it as alarming. Rather, I took it as a sign that she truly cared about our relationship. But over time, I realized that her love was nothing more than an excuse to control me. Arguments were constant, always over insignificant things that she transformed into life-or-death battles. She accused me of not paying enough attention if I didn't respond instantly, of being cold and unfeeling if I didn't react as she expected. Every problem had only one solution: doing everything her way. No matter how hard I cried, it was never enough. It got to a point where I felt like I was walking on thin ice, fearing that any word or action could trigger an endless argument. Finally, after a particularly nasty fight in which she yelled at me that I wasn't good enough for her, that I would never be a real man, and that I was wasting her time, I decided to end the relationship. It took a lot of effort to do so because she didn't accept it immediately. She insisted she look for me, she cried, she yelled, she told me she would change, but I was already decided. I couldn't continue with someone who made me feel miserable most of the time. After the breakup, I focused on my life. I got a good job, one that allowed me to pay my bills without worry and even save some money. I spent years rebuilding, healing from the emotional damage that relationship had left me. I thought I had closed that chapter of my life, but I was wrong. One day, when my life seemed to be finally in order, I received a message from an unknown number. Upon opening it, I felt the air escape my lungs. It was her, my ex. She said she needed to talk to me urgently, that it was something she couldn't wait any longer to discuss. Immediately, my instinct told me not to respond, but at the same time, curiosity gnawed at me. Why was she looking for me after so many years? Against my better judgment, I replied curtly, asking her what was so important. Her response was direct and chilling. It about our son. My mind went into a whirlwind of thoughts. Son? What son? I hadn't heard from her in years, and in all that time, she never mentioned anything. I tried to stay calm and asked her to explain. She said it had to be in person, that it was too serious to talk about over messages. The next day, we met at a coffee shop. As soon as I saw her, I knew something was wrong. She didn't look like the confident, controlling woman I remembered. She looked worn down, worried. In front of her, sitting in a chair, was a little boy. He must have been about 5 years old. When I saw him, I felt like the world stopped for a moment. Doing quick calculations, I realized that his age coincided with the time since our breakup. She didn't waste any time saying it. He's your son. I need you to take responsibility. My body immediately tensed. I couldn't process what was happening. She spoke with absolute certainty, as if it were an unquestionable truth. She said she had tried to find me before but hadn't been able to contact me, that for all those years, she had been raising the child alone with many difficulties, and now she needed help. But something didn't add up. If he really was my son, why had she never tried to tell me before? Why now? I told her that although I was willing to take responsibility if he truly was my son, I needed proof, a DNA test. Her face changed in an instant. It went from apparent sadness and vulnerability to a mixture of indignation and contained fury. She asked me if I didn't believe her, if I really thought she would be capable of lying about something like this. But I wasn't going to fall for her game again, not without proof. I'm not saying I don't believe you, I replied firmly. I just want to be sure. At that moment, her attitude changed completely. She slammed her hand on the table and looked at me with pure hatred. I can't believe you doubt me after everything we went through, after everything I suffered raising this child alone. Are you really going to ask me for a test? Yes, I answered without hesitation. She stood up abruptly, took the child by the hand, and before leaving, gave me one last look filled with contempt. You're a terrible person, she spat through gritted teeth. But don't worry, you'll see what happens when your family finds out what you're doing. And with that, she walked out of the cafe, leaving me there with my head spinning. After that encounter at the coffee shop, I sat there for several minutes trying to process everything that had happened. My ex claiming I had a son, her exaggerated reaction to my request for a DNA test, the way she had threatened to tell my family everything. It didn't make sense. Something wasn't right. On the way home, my mind was racing. I couldn't ignore the possibility that the child really was mine. But at the same time, her reaction seemed like a huge red flag. Why was she refusing a test if she was so sure? Anyone with a minimum of logic would know it's the most sensible thing to do in this type of situation. The worst part is that it didn't take long for me to discover what she meant by her threat. When I got to my apartment, I checked my phone and saw that I had several missed calls from my mother and my sister. In addition, there was a group of messages from my sister that ranged from confused questions to reproaches filled with indignation. How could you do this to her? I just talked to her and I can't believe what you're doing. You're irresponsible. I always knew you'd end up doing something like this. Mom is devastated. Call her immediately. I sighed wearily. I knew my ex would do something like this, but I didn't think it would be so fast. I didn't even have the opportunity to explain my side before she had already convinced them that I was the villain of the story. I decided to call my mother first. As soon as she answered, I knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. Is it true? She asked, her voice breaking without even greeting me. Do you really have a son and you don't want to take responsibility? I rubbed my face in frustration. Mom, listen to me. I don't know if that child is mine or not. I just asked for a DNA test. But if she says he's yours, he must be, my mother shouted as if that closed the case completely. She was always a good girl. She has no reason to lie. There it was again, my mother's tendency to believe any woman who presented herself as a victim, regardless of the facts. What if she's lying to me? I replied in the calmest voice I could. I don't understand why she refuses to take a test if she's so sure. There was a long silence. I thought that maybe that would make my mother reason a little, but her response was even worse than I expected. If you were really a real man, you would take responsibility without needing a test. That phrase hit me like a bucket of cold water. Are you telling me that I should simply accept raising a child without proof just to fulfill your idea of what it means to be a man? A child needs a father, she replied, completely evading the question. You can't turn your back on him. And what if he's not mine? What then? There was no answer, only a frustrated sigh before she told me she was disappointed in me and hung up. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be so simple. Not even 2 hours passed when my sister came looking for me at my apartment. As soon as I opened the door, she pushed me hard and entered without being invited. I can't believe what you're doing, she snapped furiously. I always knew you were selfish, but this is another level. Can you calm down and listen to me for a second? I tried to say, but she completely ignored me. You're a jerk, she continued, ignoring my attempt to explain myself. That woman has been raising your son alone for years, and you, instead of thanking her, turn your back on her. That's when I lost my patience. What if he's not mine? I yelled, fed up with no one seeming to understand the basics. Don't you think it's strange that she never contacted me in 5 years and suddenly she appears demanding money? My sister clicked her tongue in annoyance. Why do you always have to doubt everything? Not all women lie, you know. That answer made my blood boil. Not all women lie. I repeated incredulously. What about all the times she manipulated me during our relationship? What about the fact that she yelled at me in the middle of a coffee shop for asking for something completely logical? My sister crossed her arms and raised her chin arrogantly. Even if he's not yours, you have a moral obligation to help her. She loved you. You were a part of her life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not going to pay for a child that's not mine, period. You're selfish, she snapped before storming out and slamming the door. I stood there taking deep breaths, trying to calm myself down. I couldn't believe what was happening. In a matter of hours, my ex had managed to turn my own family against me. It didn't matter that I was right. It didn't matter that I was asking for something completely logical. In the eyes of my mother and sister, I was the villain of the story. But if they thought this was going to make me give in, they were very wrong. If my ex thought she could get away with using social pressure and manipulation, she was about to discover she had made a serious mistake. After the confrontation with my sister, I knew the worst was just beginning. Not even a day had passed since my ex reappeared in my life, and she already had my family on her side. It was only a matter of time before this escalated further. And sure enough, I soon found out the next day. I woke up with a dozen notifications on my phone. Calls, social media posts. My ex had decided to go beyond just manipulating my mother and sister. Now, she was trying to ruin my reputation. She had posted a long dramatic message on Facebook about how the father of her child had abandoned her for years, and now when she had finally decided to look for me, I was refusing to take responsibility. Words like coward, irresponsible, and moon without a heart. Of course, she didn't mention once that I had asked for a DNA test. No, in her version of the story, I had simply decided to reject my supposed son for no reason. The comments below her post were exactly what I expected. I can't believe there are men like that. Disgusting. That child is not to blame. How can he turn his back on him? If he didn't want to be a father, he should have been careful. The worst part is that he's probably living well while she struggles alone. My stomach churned as I read all of that. They hadn't even given me a chance to defend myself before crucifying me. But the worst was yet to come. That afternoon, my boss called me into his office. As soon as I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. "Close the door and sit down," he said in a serious tone. I sat down, trying to act natural, but with my stomach in knots. "Look, I don't know exactly what's going on, but we received an anonymous email about you," he said as he turned his computer screen towards me. There it was, a long, detailed email explaining how I was an irresponsible man who abandoned his child and how my company should reconsider having someone like that on their team. I couldn't believe it. My ex wasn't just manipulating my family, she wasn't just smearing my image on social media. Now she was trying to get me into trouble at my job. "We don't get involved in our employees' personal lives," my boss continued, "but this puts us in an awkward position. We can't allow the company name to be involved in scandals." The self-control I had not to explode with rage. "Sir, this is all a lie," I said, trying to remain calm. "That woman has no proof because there is none. I asked her for a DNA test, and she refused." My boss watched me in silence for a few seconds, then he sighed and turned off the screen. "I'm not wanting to tell you what to do, but my advice is to resolve this as quickly as possible. I don't want the company to end up in trouble for something that's not our business," he said. I nodded, though inside I was seething with rage. When I left his office, I knew I had reached my limit. It wasn't just a matter of pride or defending my truth anymore. Now, my stability, my job, my future were at risk. I wasn't going to stand idly by while she tried to destroy my life. So, I called a friend of mine who was a lawyer. "I need your help," I said directly. "My ex is trying to hold me responsible for a child that's not mine. She's slandering me, and she's even tried to involve my job in this. I want to take legal action." My friend didn't hesitate for a second. "The first thing you have to do is insist on the DNA test. If she refuses, we have a strong case against her. But if she continues with this, we can sue her for defamation." That was my new strategy. I wasn't going to keep defending myself with words. Now, I was going to take legal action. After the conversation with my lawyer friend, I felt for the first time that I had some control over the situation. I wasn't going to stand idly by while my ex tried to destroy my life. If she wanted to play dirty, then I was going to take the legal route and expose her with evidence. The first thing I did was send her a clear and direct message. "If you really believe that I am the father of your child, take the DNA test. If you refuse, I will assume that this is all an attempt at manipulation and I will proceed legally for defamation." I waited. Hours passed without a response. Then, instead of answering me directly, my sister called. "What the heck is wrong with you?" was the first thing she said. Furious, "How can you threaten her with lawyers?" I closed my eyes in frustration. "It's not a threat. It's the only way to prove the truth." "Truth," she scoffed. "The truth is that you're a coward who wants to run away from his responsibilities." I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let her get under my skin. "Tell me something." Just out of curiosity, I asked calmly, "Why do you believe her words so much?" "She has no reason to lie." I couldn't help but laugh. "Do you really believe that? Do you really think there are no women who try to manipulate and take advantage of others?" "Not in the way you're painting it." "Then tell me, why does she refuse a DNA test?" Silence. For the first time in the entire conversation, my sister didn't know what to say. "Listen," I continued, "I'm not saying I won't take responsibility if he's mine. What I'm saying is that without proof, I'm not paying her a dime. And if she continues with this, I'll sue her." "Sue her?" she whispered, as if it were unthinkable. "How can you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" I laughed bitterly. "Is it cruel to ask for a test? Is it cruel to defend myself against someone who is already trying to ruin my life? I can't believe it." "Believe it. And if you continue to take her side, then you're against me too." There were no more words, just a heavy sigh before she hung up on me. But that wasn't the worst of it. A few days later, when I thought things couldn't escalate any further, my ex and my sister did something that crossed every line. It was a Tuesday morning when I arrived at work, like any other day. Everything seemed normal until a coworker approached me with a frown. "Hey, what the heck is going on?" I asked, not understanding. He took out his phone and showed me a picture. There I was, or rather, a picture of me printed on a large poster with huge letters that read, "Abandoned his son, doesn't care about his family." I could barely process it. "Tell me this is a joke," I whispered. "It's not. Some women were outside the building this morning holding those signs and yelling. Security took them out, but a lot of people saw it already. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. My ex and my own sister had gone to my workplace with signs to publicly shame me. I ran to my boss's office. I couldn't let this go on. As soon as I walked through the door, he looked at me with a frown. I knew this was going to become a problem. He said seriously, "I told you to fix this before it affected the company." "Sir, I have nothing to do with this. I don't care who's right. What I care about is that I don't want these kinds of scandals in my office. I can't have employees with these kinds of problems." "Are you telling me you're going to fire me?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "For now, I'm suspending you. I need you to fix this mess." I couldn't believe it. Because of my ex and my sister's craziness, I was about to lose everything. I wasn't going to allow it. I left the office with only one thought in my head. Now they had gone too far. I left the building with my hands clenched into fists and rage rising to my head. My ex and my own sister had tried to humiliate me in public, and worst of all, it was working. I had been suspended from my job for something that wasn't even true. I couldn't stand idly by. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I couldn't wait any longer. I needed legal action right away. "This just got more serious," I said bluntly. "They went to my work with signs calling me a deadbeat dad, and now I'm suspended. That's public defamation and harassment." He replied without hesitation, "We can sue her for damages in addition to demanding the DNA test in court." He gave me detailed instructions on what to do next. The first thing was to document everything: screenshots of the messages, the social media posts, the photos of the signs, the anonymous emails to my company, everything. The more evidence I had, the stronger the case would be. The next thing was to send a legal notification to my ex, demanding the DNA test. Officially, it was no longer an informal request. Now it would be a legal requirement. And finally, a restraining order if she tried anything else. I hung up the call with a strange feeling in my chest. It was the first time in days that I felt like I was regaining control of the situation, but there was still one obstacle: my family. I knew my mother and sister would soon find out what I was doing, so I decided to get ahead of it. I went directly to my parents' house that same afternoon. When I entered, my mother was in the kitchen with a worried look on her face. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a tense tone. "I'm going to say this once," I said bluntly. "I'm taking legal action against my ex and against my sister if she continues to interfere." My mother's eyes widened. "You can't do this to your own sister," she exclaimed. "She did it to me first," I replied coldly. "She ruined my reputation. I almost lost my job, and she keeps meddling in something that's none of her business." "But she just wanted to help." "Help?" I laughed incredulously. "Going to my work with a sign saying I'm a deadbeat dad is helping? Posting lies about me on social media is helping?" My mother looked away. She knew I was right, but she didn't want to admit it. "All I want to know is if you're on my side or hers," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. Silence. I can't choose between my children." "Then don't interfere." I turned my back and left. At that moment, I knew that no matter what happened, I could no longer count on my family. After the confrontation with my mother, something inside me completely broke. Until that moment, I still held a glimmer of hope that she would open her eyes, that she would understand that I wasn't the villain in this story. But her response made it clear she wasn't going to choose my side, no matter how much proof I had. It didn't matter. I didn't depend on them anymore. I didn't need their approval or their support. All I cared about was clearing my name and stopping once and for all the madness of my ex and my sister. The legal war begins. My lawyer didn't waste any time. The next morning, he sent a legal notification to my ex, demanding the DNA test. Now, she had no escape either. She agreed, or she would face a lawsuit for defamation and harassment. For days, there was no response from her. I didn't know if she was trying to find another way out or if she was simply paralyzed by fear. Meanwhile, my sister sank deeper and deeper into her own foolishness. On social media, she had started making indirect posts about me. Some people would rather destroy a family than admit they are cowards. Men who refuse to be responsible don't deserve to be called men. The same comments supporting her, the same strangers telling her she was doing the right thing and that her brother was a monster. I didn't respond to any of it. My lawyer had already begun drafting the lawsuit, and if she continued to get involved, I was going to drag her into it too. But then the unexpected happened. One afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. I accept the test, but with one condition. It was my ex. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief because this nightmare was finally going to end, and anger because even in her defeat, she was trying to negotiate. No, there were no conditions. She had no power in this situation. Hours later, my lawyer received official confirmation that my ex would submit to the test. The day of reckoning had arrived, the DNA test and the end of the deception. The process was quick and unceremonious. We showed up at a clinic, each at different times to avoid confrontation. Samples were taken, and we were told the results would be ready in a few days. I didn't hear from her or my sister during that time. It was as if both had disappeared off the face of the earth. When I finally received the results, I wasn't surprised at all. 0% probability of paternity. He wasn't my son. He never was. As soon as my lawyer received the documents, he made sure to send them immediately to her legal representative. Now that there was scientific proof that everything was a lie, my ex had no escape. Within days, she received formal notification that we would proceed with the lawsuit for defamation and fraud. But instead of fighting, she did something even more pathetic. She tried to beg me. "I'm sorry, I didn't want it to come to this. I was just desperate. Don't sue me, please. I'll take everything back. I promise." It was amazing how her tone changed as soon as she was trapped. I responded with the same coldness she showed me when she tried to ruin my life. "It's not my problem anymore." The lawsuit ran its course, although it never went to trial. My ex ended up losing. She had to pay me a considerable amount for damages, which left her in an even worse financial situation than she was already in. Her reputation was also ruined. Now everyone knew that she had tried to trick several men with the same scheme. My sister, in her stubbornness, continued to defend her for a while, but when she saw that no one else supported her, she simply stopped talking about it.